All right, welcome everybody to today's session. We're doing another Win-Loss Wednesday live. Excited to have two fabulous guests today. We have Nick Siddoway, who's the president and CRO of True Voice from Corporate Visions, and we're also joined by Brad Rosen, the president of Sales Assembly. So thank you so much for joining us both today.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Look forward to it.
So my name is Sheila Lehar. I'm the Senior Content Director here at Crayon. Crayon, for those who may not be familiar, it's a competitive intelligence platform. And today we're going to talk a little bit about win-loss specifically and lost the deal, now what? So how to use win-loss insights to train your sales team. Before we kick things off, we're going to do a quick poll question to see kind of where people are at in terms of their current win-loss challenges. So Caitlin just threw that up onto your screen. And we're asking everybody today, what is your biggest challenge with win-loss? So option one is we're having trouble getting buy-in for win-loss at our company. So you're probably really early on there. The second option is consistency. So win-loss is more of a one-off project. We aren't consistent with our win-loss program, which is something we often hear from our customers, and effectively incorporating the insights we gain from win-loss across our stakeholders. Our stakeholders is the third option and another sort of common challenge. So we'll let everybody fill that in for about a second, and then let's see what the results are. Let's see where people's challenges are. Oh, pretty even split for this one. So 32% just having trouble getting that buy-in across the company for win-loss efforts. 29% consistency, so it's more just one-off as opposed to sort of a built-in program that you're doing consistently. And the third option at 39%, or I should say the third result, effectively incorporating the insights from win-loss across our stakeholders. And we're going to talk a lot about that third challenge today. So excited to see a lot of you in that bucket, which makes total sense as to why you're here today. So kicking things off, we're going to talk about getting your revenue teams involved sort of early and often with win-loss. Nick, I'm going to pass first question over to you. There's often a lot of reluctance from sales or customer success around win-loss programs and what could potentially be uncovered. So how can product marketers, CI leaders generate some excitement for win-loss initiatives?
Wonderful question. And I'm feeling a little bit, I don't know if compassion is the right word. I feel like this could turn into a therapy session really quickly, because if we think about the reality, you've got an executive team, you've got a board, whoever's authorized and commissioned win-loss work, they're doing it with the intent of driving revenue gains, right? They want to increase win rates. In fact, we've surveyed thousands and thousands, right? We've been doing this for 20 years. And everyone always says we're doing win-loss to impact win rates. Well, not everybody. I can't speak in absolutes, but it's over 95% from our own experience. And then what happens is we task product marketers or competitive intelligence or centers of excellence or maybe even some sales enablement to go do this work. And rarely does it get to a place where it's actually impacting what a rep does differently. So we put this nearly impossible task on you all, say, go impact win rates, but go figure out how to get sales to play with you, to cooperate and want to jump in this sandbox. So I guess that's my way of saying you're all awesome. You're not alone in this. This is a very difficult challenge for nearly all win-loss programs, even in the best of cultures. So keep pushing through and powering through. Now, what I would recommend, how do you get that buy-in? There's a couple of places I would go first. One is either find a sales manager. So we're talking get as frontline as possible. It's great when you get that edict or that directive from an executive, but even then they give directives all the time and they're not always executed on right down at the front line. So go find a sales manager or two, a couple of models, a couple of early adopters they're excited about the idea of win-loss driving better win rates for their teams. Now we know win-loss analysis gives you product information, price information, marketing information, et cetera. But it all stops if you can't get the sales team to agree to inputting or inserting or suggesting their deals go into the machine. So go find a couple of frontline managers that catch the vision, that understand what's in it for them, and get them to be models. And then quickly you can start to share or disseminate, socialize some of their successes across the organization to help others jump on board as well. The other thing I would suggest is start with the wins. The reason sales reps or customer experience reps or CS might be a little timid to participate is because they feel they'll be exposed, right? Something about what they're doing is going under the microscope, and that's uncomfortable. Even in today's world where we've got call recordings and everything else, it's still scary a little bit. So in your communication, in your launch, or as you're building momentum for your win-loss program, make sure they understand that this is all about continuous learning. This is about improvement, and what's in it for them is they're getting the exact win formula to help them win more deals in the future. So rooting anything you say and do around win-loss about helping the individual rep will get their buy-in faster. And please start with celebrating wins. Don't go directly to the losses and call out everything they did wrong. That will.
And another thing.
And another, yeah. And I'm going to be quiet here so others can jump in. But yeah, start with some wins, celebrate them at the highest level. And that'll start to get people feeling a little more comfortable with the idea that it's not a witch hunt. People aren't being fired over this. This is really an opportunity to learn and grow.
Awesome. All right. 2 great points there to find those early adopters that understand the vision and start with the wins. Brad, anything you would add in terms of, hopefully you're getting the program going, but keeping the momentum for your win-loss program with this particular audience, with the revenue teams?
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of add on to the wins in a different manner of saying, try and find ways to make quick wins. And so if that's your sales team is sharing that they're not feeling like the leads that are coming in are within their ICP, or they're not being distributed evenly, maybe something to do with their territories, maybe it has to do with the sales process. There's probably things that they believe anecdotally that they could do better to close more deals. And you're consistently hearing that feedback. So if you can find ways to look through the data, don't make it up, but like if you could find things that are corroborating what the sales team is saying within your data, your win-loss analysis, and then you're kind of on their side then, right? You're saying, yes, we are seeing this in the data, the things that you've been sharing. Now let's go out and try and fix it and try and make it better. Then I think that sales team feels heard. They feel like you're on their team, and then maybe they are opening up a little more, as Nick was saying, okay, now let's talk about some of the losses. Let's see where we didn't win some deals, and let's look under the hood a little further. So if you can find quick wins, especially if they're able to coincide with a lot of the things that you've been hearing from the team, a lot of times that gets buy-in and gets folks on your side.
I love that. Yeah, it's such a great point. You just make people more comfortable. Yeah, make sure that they're feeling heard. Those are all great points. And yeah, building that trust, right? And once they have some of that, they're more apt to share. So one question. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. Brad sparked a wonderful thought. And if you are in a position right now where you are struggling to get buy-in from the organization or even budget to scale, one great way to do this is to include some no decisions into your win-loss analysis. And if you can find some deals that maybe didn't pick you, nor did they pick your competitor, they're still in that pending or that no decision phase, and get some feedback on what the pursuit team could have done differently or what they can do differently to still win the deal. You work with a rep or a sales manager on that type of intel. Suddenly, reps will start to get excited about what we can do for that largest population or disposition deals, which is no decisions. I think we're up to, everyone's got their own research and data on this, but I think we're up to nearly 45% in 2023. Deals are expected to go to no decision, not win, not loss, but to no decision. There's the proverbial gold over there. Find a couple of those, they're less threatening. And I think to Brad's point, those are some great ways to find some awesome early wins and get buy-in.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. And buy-in is definitely, and getting buy-in, I should say, is definitely something we hear a lot from folks that we talk to. And it's difficult. So anything you can do to get some help there is going to be beneficial. One question I had for both of you, Brad, I'll kick this over to you to start, is for win-loss to obviously be effective, data collection, data hygiene is really important. Do you have any tips just to how to ensure that reps are, updating data on their end? I know this is a constant challenge for everyone. Any tips that you might be able to share there related to just data consistency and collection?
Yeah, if I had the data consistency and collection problem solved, I wouldn't even be on this webinar right now. I'd be like, I don't know, like swimming in my Scrooge McDuck pot of like gold. But I think that's an issue, like you said, across all of the sales process and across all organizations, especially as we have so many tools, different platforms, data's housed in different places, and the best of RevOps teams even, are able to put that data together, but it's still very challenging and allow people to have the data at their fingertips. So that's an aside that it's always hard to collect data. But I think the point is that if it's tying it back to that earlier discussion that we had, is showing the reps exactly why it's valuable for them to collect this information, because ultimately they're going to do what they think is best for them and is going to maximize their commissions, basically, right? So like, how are they going to sell more? And if inputting this data is going to allow me to have better information as to like how we can improve our sales process, improve our product, as Nick said, maybe I can go find 2 or 3 no decisions tomorrow and hit Q2 and really feel good about it, or put some dollars in my pocket, then that's an important way to do it. So there's always carrot and stick with data, but I do like to try the carrot first, and definitely showing how the data that goes in is going to be used within your process. So even pulling out some folks and highlighting the people that are putting it in, potentially showing that those folks are able to have more conversations or are able to kind of test some of the new ideas that are coming from all this win-loss analysis. So I like highlighting a few major players and folks who are doing it the right way, and hopefully allowing them to be the leaders of the pack.
Makes sense. Yeah. Anything you would add there, Nick?
I'd echo. I think Brad's spot on. If this is a real problem in your organization and you're not getting the top-down support to mandate certain fields, which I know is like the default answer for all things CRM, right? Just mandate another field. But there are tools out there that you can leverage. Some are free, if I may, where you can actually look at, okay, email sent and comb contact information based on that. We're getting better in providing sales enablement tools to help in this regard, but it is a behavior problem. And to Brad's point, the answer really is getting that buy-in so they can see why they're putting it in the ever-present with them. But there are some ways around it and some tools out there that can help you skirt the issue if you're not getting the support you need from above.
Thanks. Yeah. So just again, showing them what's in it for them, framing it up that way, and how valuable this is. Might be one more thing, but in the end, it's going to be beneficial to you. Awesome. So I'm going to move on actually to some survey questions related to the sales process. When you're developing questions for win-loss interviews, what are the must-have questions to include to better understand a prospect's experience with your company's sales process?
I think on the question side, you want to understand, I think Nick was saying the first one on value, obviously understanding like what value they're getting out of the tools. You also want to be able to understand what are some of the things that they were included in the decision, right? And understanding why they went with you versus, for instance, somebody else. And then I also like to look at, is it process or product? Like you're trying to separate the two. So trying to understand where things go wrong. There's a lot of data to suggest that process is actually very much a big player in deciding whether you win and lose deals, because a lot of tools can do somewhat of the similar type of things within your market. And so the way that you go about sharing how, the ROI, especially these days, and how you're able to translate that up to, say, the CFO can make a big difference in your win rates. So I do think that there's a way to ask the questions to understand exactly like, what were the certain things that made you go with a competitor or go with us, and then lean into those even further.
Awesome. And then you were talking a little bit about sales rep behavior in the last section. I mean, are there questions you should think about including in your survey that allude to like improving sales rep behavior in the sales process? Like what do you think is potential to include there?
Yeah, I think it's challenging, especially as like who's asking the questions, because I think a lot of times folks are hesitant to give specific feedback on people. It's sometimes uncomfortable to do that, and so a lot of times that's more on like the sales coaching side. But I do think you have an ability, if it comes from a third party, to say where are there opportunities for improvement, and that should shine a light. And if we have that open process that we talked about with trust, ideally, that's really helping to show if you can see that across multiple data points as well. Like we don't just want one person saying one thing and take that as gospel. Like we want to understand, okay, well, if we hear this 2 or 3 times with the same rep or the same team, then maybe we want to lean into it further. So I do think that there's a little bit of like maybe your styles didn't mesh, and so you want to take it with a grain of salt. But having an understanding of like what certain people are doing and what their process is can help shine a light on some of those things.
Really take a look at 4 different categories. Look at the pricing and value question bank, look at the company reputation and service question bank, look at your product question bank, and then of course, to your last comment, all things related to the sales experience. And then really when it comes down to it, if you asked every single question for every stakeholder in those 4 categories, you'd create a 30-minute or a 60-minute survey experience for your respondents, and that's not ideal. So there is some prioritization that needs to happen. I will share one study that was done recently that will help maybe frame your thinking when you consider which questions should be included in win-loss. And it's a poker study for anybody that plays the game. That's not me, so I don't pretend to know. But we studied, or not we, but there was a study done on 103 million online poker hands. And what they were trying to understand is, okay, how many times did the best hand actually, win the pot? And it was only about 12%, 12 or 13% did best hand win. The remaining, the 88%, give or take, it was best player with an inferior hand. So we have to resist the urge to think that, when we're asking questions and trying to help reps win more, it's not always just giving them the best hand. Best hand would be things like product, things like competitive intelligence. Those are all necessary, but we really need to focus on best player. What are the behaviors to help them outperform the other players? And that's where it comes into this sales experience and that question bank. And there's 8. I don't know how deep you want me to go here. Maybe this is a moment to, I put it in the chat perhaps, and we can keep moving, but there are 8 competencies that we know if a rep outperforms the other player in those 8 areas, they're going to win the deal. And that's best player versus competitive best player, winning the majority of the time. So I can put them in chat maybe, Sheila, and we can keep going. And if people have follow-up questions to it, happy to address them, but don't want to slow us down with the other questions.
And I just want to add to that is like, the good news is you can train your sales team and the best players, as Nick is saying, like you can train people to be a better salesperson. And I think that's important. And we don't want to lean back on, well, it's just the product, it's just my leads. There's like a million other reasons why you could not sell a deal, but think of all the reasons why you could. And that's something that is under your control. And how do you ensure that you have a culture of learning? How do you ensure that people are learning to be better salespeople and you're instilling a sales process that is resonating with your prospects? That's something that's under your control. And I think it's really enlightening that has that much effect potentially on your wins and your losses.
Yeah, I love that. We do have a couple questions coming through the chat, so we can pause and see if there's any good ones related to kind of what we're chatting about. Caitlin, what do we got?
Yes, we have a question from an anonymous attendee. Do you ask all involved, so sales, product, demo teams, etc., the same questions in the surveys?
Absolutely not. I know it takes a lot more work on the architecture or the build side. So here you go, more work for you all to do. But what we do have very specific or tailored questions based on who in the buying committee is responding, what their role is, what their function is. And then it branches based on their responses is what I'd recommend. So having just a static survey is a great start, but at some point it won't answer those burning questions that your stakeholders are asking.
Anything else, Caitlin? We're good? All right. Let's talk a little bit about churn and survey questions. Brad, I'll pass this over to you. Are there certain questions you should be including in the survey that can help your team learn more about the customer experience and sort of help identify maybe some early signals of churn as a potential issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always looked at churn that starts like the second you sign up, and usually your first 60 to 90 days are actually very indicative of whether someone's going to churn later on. And so I do believe that there are opportunities to ask questions around implementation, around time to value, even if you're like 9 months or 12 months in and they just churned, and trying to understand exactly like where in the process you fell short, because a lot of times we think of it as they didn't see enough value, or it wasn't, they weren't able to the price increases or something else maybe got to them. But I do think a lot of times it's like failure to launch is a big issue, or at least enough. And especially given the competing priorities, that's usually how things go. So the other part I would try and understand is, given that there's a lot of changes within the current economy and things that are going on, sometimes like budgets are just cut. And so then now you want to understand, okay, the budget was cut, but then like, why was our tool specifically chosen, right? Like, what was that discussion internally? And ideally our teams are having that discussion with the clients. But if we can't have that, that's the type of stuff we want to understand, because ultimately our customer success teams have an ability to change that. And you can do it on the fly, even if they're, kind of mid-cycle. And so that's actually, I think, one of the biggest opportunities for teams is understanding which accounts are red, which accounts are maybe like yellow, and we still have more room to grow. But if you can get those insights pretty quickly, you can take action on them. And they're already your customers. So as opposed to prospects where they need to come through a funnel, which could be 3, 6, 9 months down the road, current customers, you should be able to take action on really quickly. And so I think finding those quick wins and being able to get customers back on track can greatly affect your revenue.
And then Nick, anything you would add there in terms of the questions you might be including that can identify, potential churn risks?
Yeah, if we're thinking about just at the front end, their initial purchase decision, when you do a traditional, win-loss outreach, I think it's just important to note, and Brad was hitting on this, not every win is a solid win. You can have a weak win, and you need to identify, what risks may exist from, to Brad's point, day one. I can't tell you how many times I see in our customers' data, or even our own win-loss, where we win the deal, it's closed out in the CRM and everybody celebrates. We get the feedback, and the primary buyer says, well, I was kind of leaning towards X, but someone in my organization has used your product before and kind of influenced the deal. Well, that buyer, that point of contact, and possibly a champion, they're looking now throughout the process for an opportunity to say, nope, I told you this was the wrong choice. I'm going to go to my preferred vendor. Or, that's an extreme example, but it is a common one. So yeah, just understanding that there are weak wins or nail biting type wins that do happen. And again, to Brad's comment, you want to understand what could we do now in customer experience to ensure we win them over every step of the way.
I think
that's a different answer to churn.
There's also what Nick is saying is like the expectations and what we're set, right? Sometimes we're over promising. Sometimes, we say one thing and the customer hears another, or different points of contact want different things out of the tool. That's really important to understand up front, because then you have time to hopefully address that. But if you find it out too late and it's like, well, we actually signed up because we wanted leads. It's like, well, we don't provide leads. So like, I'm not sure how that got lost in translation. And so I think setting the right expectations, is really important too.
Awesome. Having the weak win perspective is something to think about. And of course it happens. I'm going to move on to talk a little bit about evaluating the results. So you've launched win-loss as a program, you have your survey, you're looking at the results now, and hopefully finding some blind spots for your sales team and your revenue team within the results. Nick, I'm going to pass this over to you. When you're evaluating win-loss survey results, we talked earlier, about not boiling the ocean. You don't want to sort of look at everything. It can be too overwhelming. How do you stay focused and sort of identifying the specific blind spots or potential gaps for your sales team when you're looking through these results?
Yeah, this is where the fun begins, right? If we can get past just the data collection, which I know many on the phone are struggling with, it's getting the buy-in, so we have enough deals to analyze, or the CRM hygiene. That's all the heavy lift. And once you get to this point, you're talking about, Sheila, where we're now analyzing the insights and hopefully being a part of how we convert that to action. This is why we do what we do. This is where we have fun, right? And I think it really just depends, to your question, what you're hiring win-loss to do, or what you're looking for that piece of insight or feedback to do from an action standpoint. So, for example, if I've got a rep and I just want to do some maybe some deal coaching, right? I only need one data point to start to action on that as a sales coach or a rep or sales enablement. And it's all around that feedback that came in response to their sales experience. Now, I may want to marry that with conversational intelligence. If folks are using Gong or Chorus or Wingman or all the others that exist out there, it's great to marry these together. But I can really stay focused on my objective, which is just how can I get a rep to do better on a particular deal, and the learning with a single data point, and the focus is clear. If I want to get to now skill coaching, I may need 10 data points on a rep to say, okay, you're struggling maybe in your ability to demonstrate value in a demo, right? That's the skill or the competency we need to work on. I want to have 10 data points at least to help me understand how I can help a rep improve here. And then when you start getting to what you're talking about, how do you stay focused on the aggregated trends? Now you open this up to all your deal universe, and you're wondering about why competitor A is beating us in GOB or with SKU X and all of that. And that's where, gosh, again, this team is so invaluable in being able to analyze and connect the dots. Ultimately, what you're doing is trying to answer, again, those burning questions. And you've got to look at the data in those different segments in aggregate, all the way down to an individual piece of feedback, depending on, what you're hiring it to do, what the job to be done for the win-loss program is.
Yeah, it makes sense. The sort of amount of data points that you need is going to depend on the goal and the question you're trying to answer for yourself and for your sales team. Brad, anything that you would add there?
I think sometimes it's also just like reinforcement. So for instance, sometimes reps may believe one thing and their manager believes another when we're talking about skills as to like how competent somebody is, maybe vice versa as well. And so having that third party validation, I'll call it, is super important to understand. And I think somebody put in the chat around like, how do you overcome the resistance from the loss survey? Because people seem to already know why they're losing, which is the same principle as the skills. Like they think they understand what's going on. But it's usually like that second level or third level that you don't understand. Like we lost to a competitor. You could go back to Nick's, example before, like you lost to a competitor because somebody had used your competitor in the past and was pushing for it. You didn't necessarily lose on the grounds of like your product features or the way you were selling. Like there could be more to it than just we went with a competitor, and you really might not find that out by asking somebody, but they might put it in a survey, right? And you might be able to ask questions to start to draw out second and third level findings, which I think is important. And that's where when the reps start to see things like that, where they're like, oh, I didn't realize that. The first thing is you're training now your team on questions they could have asked during the process to actually find out that information and potentially overcome those objections before the deal was ever decided won or lost. That would be the ideal scenario, but at least we're getting true understanding of feedback and really understanding like where the deep down motivations are coming from.
Yeah, I love that. Getting a few layers deeper, I should say. And yeah, is there any other questions? Actually, you just brought up the question in the chat. Are there any other questions, Caitlin, that we want to sort of pause here and ask?
Yes, Brad kind of touched on this one, but how do you overcome that resistance for the loss surveys? Because like you said, the team already knows why they lost the deal.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything to add there. We can move on to the next one. There isn't.
Is it ever desirable practice to do win-loss survey with every deal?
every deal. Oh, Nick, you look like you have something to say on this one.
I've got a lot of energy on this one. And the reason for it is just based on experience. We've been doing this for organizations for 20 years. And it's really evolving. It has evolved, thank goodness, over time. But most of the innovation has happened within the last 12, 24 months in terms of a win-loss solution, either in-house or with a vendor. And before, traditional win-loss would suggest go buy a bucket of interviews. Let's go talk to X number of our deals that were lost. What would happen, and some of you may have experienced this here on the call, what would happen is you do all this work to get 50 data points, 50 interviews, or 50 surveys, and you'd march into that executive meeting that you were invited to, beating your chest a little bit, excited about the aggregated data you were about to share. And without fail, the sales executive in the room, as you told them what they needed to do differently to win, folds their arms and says, wait a second, what's my end size here? How many deals did you analyze? And if you haven't reached at least 15% penetration on the deal universe, they will fold their arms, they will scoff, and they'll say, come back when you have more. And you've really lost some credibility. So is it possible to do it on every single deal? Yes, you can scale it. Can you do it alone? I don't know what your internal resources look like. It does take time, does take effort, but you do at least want enough deal coverage where the data, the aggregated insights that you share and the recommendations that you make are credible, right? Which is kind of silly to say, but it's such a reality. And I feel so bad for anybody that's gone into that room and had their insights discounted, because it's not easy to get to. And I would just invite everybody prior to going into that room, use that as an opportunity to ask for more budget, to ask for more resources, and say, maybe these are emerging trends. We need to get to 15% coverage minimum, but I need more people on my team, or I need more dollars. If that's the objective of you being in the room, that's a solid win, and one that they can't scoff at or discredit. I went off on a tangent there a little bit, but yes, every deal is ideal, not always possible, but yes, you need a certain end size that will silence any naysayers or anybody that might be out there trying to sink this initiative.
Can I add one caveat to that? Because I completely agree. I think one key is, like, if you're at the early stages of launching your surveys or changing, product has changed, market has changed, whatever it may be, don't put all your eggs into one basket, right? Like, kind of break them into different groups so that in case you're starting to see emerging trends, you're able to change some of the questions, maybe add questions, adapt questions, to be able to get information that may stem from the early answers of other customers. And so kind of breaking them into cohorts is probably a good idea, and then getting as many as you can. But if you're early on and don't know exactly every single question you want to ask, or if there's certain things that you're trying to learn and then adapt, you want to make sure you have space to do that as well.
Yeah, great points, because people are at sort of different phases in the journey here with win-loss. So yeah, depending on where you're at, something to think about. Awesome. Did we have maybe one more question before we move on to the next section?
Yeah, we have a question from Laura. You mentioned that improving demos should be done by working in confidence and adding value to what you're selling. What are some of your techniques?
I think this was in reference to kind of taking some of the coaching that we're learning in the losses and then bringing them back into our sales process. I think there's a lot of ways through different sales methodologies that you can do this, but I would specifically say, as it relates to this, of understanding potentially where you're losing or winning deals and making sure that we're training our reps on exactly how to get that information. So when we gave the example of like losing to a competitor, that's like a high level thing. And so if somebody says, yeah, we're evaluating you and your competitor, if you understood that there are times that not only did you lose to a competitor, but you lost because the competitor had better security, lower pricing, like there's a reason why the competitor won, then you should start to ask security questions. Okay, what security are you interested in? What other vendors are you looking at? And so then you're able to actually dig into address concerns before they come about. If you understand fully why you may be losing deals to price competitor, whatever it may be. So it's really taking the insights and then creating discovery questions around those, and then addressing concerns along the way before the client does. Because a lot of times concerns and objections probably half the time you hear about them and half the time you don't. They're in a closed door meeting that you're not a part of. And so if you're able to address those before they come up, then you have a much better chance of success.
Anything you would add to that, Nick?
Yeah, if it's a great answer. And if you're thinking about future state, you know, the utopia of win-loss, again, going back to why organizations invest in win-loss, ultimately is to impact the rep's ability to win more deals. You do want to get to a place where you're able to map your question set directly to whatever methodology you subscribe to. And that way you're drawing a clear connection between, okay, if my rep scored poorly in the demo on this specific competency, we now know they need to attend this course or look at this refresher, or, you know, whatever the organization is doing to provide reinforced learning and development. But you want those to be mapped together or mirror. That's almost like win-loss 5,000 level courses. But you do that, you start to be in a place where you are having immediate impact, and you're seeing this work you're doing driving revenue, not just collecting data. So I love what Brad said, and certainly if anyone wants some help or best practices around what do you do to map to whatever content and methodology you subscribe to, happy to be a resource there.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to coaching. So you've got the feedback, and now it's time to incorporate it and working with your reps. Brad, sort of a tactical question for you to kick off this section. Any suggestions around how to initially deliver the feedback to the sales team once you've done maybe like your first win-loss analysis? Yeah, you've got the results. Is there anything you might suggest there, even tactically, in terms of how you're going to deliver that to the sales team?
Yeah, I think you have to be ready for pushback, as Nick said. Even in, like, he was talking about executives, but the same thing with the sales team. They're probably going to come with skepticism. So make sure you have all your I's dotted and T's crossed, and like you're pretty confident. You are confident in what the data says, and then being able to take examples and ideally share with somebody who maybe is willing to use some of this and share like how they're going to make it better. So if you could find a little tiger team, or potentially like even your best reps, a lot of times they're the most open to feedback because they're confident in what they're doing and they're just looking for edges to get even better. And if the other reps are looking at the best reps and seeing them leaning into something like this, it's typically a cue like, oh, I should probably be doing that as well. So if you can find some folks that are open to this and be kind of your internal champions on the team, I think that's important. And then sharing wins and losses. Like, it doesn't all have to be, this is what you can do to get better, this is what you can do to get better. Hey, Mary, you did this wonderfully, and that's why you won this deal. Like, great job. Let's do more of that. There's positive reinforcement that we need to make sure that we're leaning into as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's this can be a positive thing. Like, we don't need to just sort of focus on losses here. Nick, is there anything that you've seen among maybe your customers in terms of how they're delivering this initial win-loss, maybe like I said early on, to the sales team?
Yeah, it's common that you see it in a weekly call or a monthly sales call. Sales kickoffs, et cetera, is a common use case for where you disseminate or share some of the win-loss data. But Brad is so spot on. Be prepared for resistance. And what happens is, as you share aggregated data, is every sales rep in the room is looking around and saying, I'm so glad they're in the room. They need to hear this. But nobody looks at it and says, oh, this win-loss data might be mine. I could learn from this because sales were just wired that way. And that's where you get back to that comment about every deal. The more volume that you have to where you can show Nick Siddoway my own win-loss reasons, now you got my attention. But as long as it stays aggregated with a small n, and Brad's right, it's just about collecting some of the examples, getting some buy-in, get to volume as quickly as you can. And then you get to a place where the manager, we expect all of our frontline managers to be sales coaches too. I don't know who came up with that idea, and I know it's been around for a long time, but I saw a stat recently that said 78% of the time, I think it was, this might even be Gartner, 78% of the time, a rep deems their coaching session with their manager as completely unproductive and unfruitful. So We got some work to do here. But
because
but
that manager was probably just a rep a little while ago, and
that's exactly what happens, right?
In training, right?
You are now the sales manager. Go. Yeah, you're exactly right. So I am seeing a greater appetite and a push. We're doing this with a lot of our customers, where we're empowering our sales managers with a template and a script. This is how you incorporate win-loss data into your coaching session, and just make it really that easy. And again, as it's been stated, when it's their own data, you can't really dispute it or put up a wall against it.
And then if you can get prescriptive, we mentioned this a little bit, but if you can start to put trackers within your, Gong or Chorus or whatever you're using, and so someone mentions your competitor and all of a sudden you have an ability to jump in deal and say, hey, I think when we get on the next call, we should ask these 5 questions based on the competitive intelligence that we've been pulling. And if they see that work, right, like, whoa, this helped me win this deal or move this deal along more. Now you have a point of reference for them to say, this is going to help me close more business. And now you have their buy-in. And so how are we able to bring it back to what are they working on now? Because retrospective is also tough to look at, because you're like, hey, that was in the past, but what are you going to do to help me now? Right? That's what they're looking for. And the business is looking for.
Yeah, for sure. And I love trackers too. We have them at Crayon. So big fan of Gong and what you can kind of do there. And keeping on this topic, Brad, anything else you can share in terms of incorporating the findings from win-loss into training specifically, into messaging? What are maybe the first steps that a company needs to take to start taking this stuff and really using it actionably into the training for their reps?
Yeah, I think you really need to break it into one of 3 buckets. And this is how, we at Sales Assembly look at it as well. There's really 3 ways to train. The first is core skill development. Do you train your team on the core skills they need to be proficient at their job? And that kind of goes into that poker survey, right? Do you have a really good foundation to be able to be a good rep? So are we faltering there? The second part would be your product training. Do we understand exactly what we're doing and how we're going to market with our product and how we compete with others? And then the third is really your sales process and methodology. Now, all of these come together into one overall result, but you really have to hone in on the feedback and which bucket are we talking about? Because there's different ways to address each of those. If it's skills, you should think about hey, how am I fostering skill development? As Nick said, usually that's really tough unless you have a really strong enablement team that knows exactly what they're doing, which most folks are underinvested in that. If it's product, then all right, let's talk about product training. Let's talk about the actual product, and there's things that we can do there. And then if it's more sales process, there's ways to address that as well. So I would look at exactly what the feedback is, which bucket that feedback's coming in, and then we can address based on that.
I love that. I love those 3 specific buckets where, you can just pull the information and have a framework around where it needs to go to improve the reps and coach them better. Nick, anything you would add there in terms of messaging or coaching once you do have those insights and training?
Yeah, I don't need to belabor it. It's a great topic. And again, maybe the topic for the entire next webinar we do together. But I think Brad's comments are spot on. And that's the crux. If we haven't reached the stage, if your win-loss program today isn't now talking about the action, the so what, going back to that evolution, we've moved past just wanting data. We've moved past even wanting insights. Organizations are saying, give me recommendations, help me action on everything that's being collected. And I think Brad hit it perfectly. But if you're not there yet, do whatever you need to with your programs to make sure you're to a place where you're spending your time on that actioning, that recommendation piece, not just on the data collection.
Awesome. I want to talk about competition for a little bit because you're, in going through your win-loss insights, you're going to get competitive feedback potentially. How best, Nick, I'll pass it over to you. How best can you sort of prioritize incorporating those competitive feedback into your, training and messaging for your reps, especially if you're in a really competitive industry where it came up quite a bit in the win-loss findings?
Yeah, this is where I go back to that poker study. And I think Brad hit on this a little bit earlier too. When we think about best hand, not always being the reason why you win. So you could have an inferior product, you could have a higher price, you could have a more convoluted sales process, or whatever it may be, a buying process, and you can still win the deal because the rep outperformed the competitor's rep. So if I'm thinking about how to prioritize conversational intelligence and where I can help, it will be focused primarily on how am I enabling best player, because that's who their competition is. It's the other best player. And I don't want to show my hand too much here because the NBA finals just ended. I know NHL is hot topic right now. Congratulations to those Vegas fans. But you look at this, you can have coaching staffs, you can have the right plays. This is all best hand stuff, right? You have the right facilities, the right medical staff, everything, the right therapists, but you still need to figure out how best players can compete at the highest level. So you need them both. But we really should be focusing on competitive intelligence to change a rep behavior in this deal or the next deal. So that's what I'd prioritize on. And what Brad, I think, said earlier was we should still be looking at competitive intelligence for price changes. We should still be looking at it for product or feature changes, but those things take time. They take a lot of time to materialize inside of an organization. Get those going, build momentum around those, use CI to help fuel those decisions. But really, we got to get to, okay, from a competitive standpoint, what's my best player rep doing versus that best player rep and help them in the next deal. That's how I'd prioritize it.
I love it. Anything I will say, I don't love the hockey reference because I'm still a salty Bruins fan.
I'm so sorry. I knew I'd offend somebody.
I'm still upset about the Bruins, but that's okay. I'll get over it. Brad, anything you would add in terms of competitors and making sure you're prioritizing there?
Just a few things to piggyback off of what Nick said. The first is if we are going to start looking into our product updates, features, whatever that is, I would share that with the team, like if it's definitive in some respect, because you do want to show that they're not in this alone. It's not like, hey, we have an inferior product, we're just going to keep going to market with that. It's like, no, we learned some opportunities here, and it might take a quarter or a year or however long it takes to develop things. As we know, development takes a while, but at least showing that like the company is invested in this cross-functionally, right? CS is going to be doing this, product is going to be doing that, marketing is going to be doing, these other things to help support you. I do think that's really important, that it's not always sales' thing to rectify and to change. And so sales is problem. So that would be one. And the second part of that, I think, is important when you're talking about, hey, we're going up against a competitor, also looking at from an operational perspective, like what is our core ICP? Where are we winning? And making sure that you're in those deals. Because I am a true believer of when you go into a deal, it's possible that two identical products are both great for identical customer sets and firmographic, companies. But typically there's like a better fit, one or the other, right? And I think if you're honest with yourself and with your customers, that typically works out. And then you should focus on your core ICP of like where your product plays best. So I do think that there's an operational gain there too. If you're talking to the folks who are creating territories, who are looking at the lead generation and making sure that we're talking to the right people in these deals. Because when you're in the deal, you should ideally have the best players, like Nick was saying, and do everything you can to maximize, but we can also make sure that we're having the right conversations with the right people.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot of good advice around competitors and competition and win-loss. I'm going to pause now and see if we have any other questions from the audience that we might want to address. I know we've got like 10 minutes-ish left.
Sarah Lynn dropped into the Q&A a tactic they heard on another webinar, and I'd love to know your thoughts. Salespeople do not get their commissions until they have submitted their CI survey responses. So.
Wow, Nick, that's got to bring it ear to ear for Nick.
What's you guys?
I could talk all day about comp plans. You can do a lot of things to withhold money and whatever. I think you just have to decide like how valuable is that to you? Because I do caution people to look at it. If it's one of the most important things that you can do, then maybe you want to go that route. But just keep in mind like what that does to the psyche of a salesperson. And typically the stick is less impactful than the carrot, and you're just not going to get as good of answers, and they're not going to be necessarily bought in. So I don't know that I would necessarily make it, required, but like there are to get paid commission, for instance, but there are opportunities to share why it's the best. And so I would just be careful of alienating your sales team.
Agreed.
Yeah.
As much as Nick would like that.
In some cases, I've seen this done before. And in some cases, that's still, and this might lead into another question someone else had, that's asking the rep to give their reasons why they think they won or lost the deal. I think anyone that's got some real experience around this, and this was a Gartner stat, the rep is wrong more than 70% of the time for the true reason why they won or lost the deal. And Brad talked about getting to different levels, right? The top level is I lost because of product and price, and I won because I'm fantastic, right? That's usually how that goes. And to get down to second level or third level, that's the real reason that drove the win or the loss. So yeah, it's great if you want to motivate or incentivize or carrot and stick your folks to put in their win-loss reasons, but it doesn't give you anything. You want them to submit their deal to your win-loss engine, right? Give you the green light to go ahead and submit, their contacts to whatever, process you're following for third party or buyer win-loss analysis.
Yeah, and there's another question about, is pricing typically the lost reason? I actually tell my team that price is never the reason. Like that is never a reason why you did not buy. I guarantee that you can have $1 million tool, and if you can show that there's over $1 million value, although like dollar of expense and dollar of revenue, you could have that discussion. But like if there's significantly more value than $1 million, then somebody will buy the tool. And so price is typically a scapegoat as to like why somebody didn't buy. Because if they didn't have the budget, they could push another tool to make the budget if it was really that impactful. Like they will actually do that. So with my team personally, and I'm interested to hear everyone else's opinion, but like with my team, I always say that price is not the issue. They did not see the value of what we were asking them to pay. That's what price means to me. And so we didn't show enough value for where we're at.
Price is the easiest way to get them off your back, right? I don't want to tell my rep why I didn't choose them. So it was price. Now go away. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We did a study on this and found that in the order of true win-loss reason, price was number 3. Price is always going to be a factor in the decision, rarely the number 1 or number 2 reason for the decision. Price was 3rd. Second was product. I know you can guess number 1, sales experience. We're talking about what drives the win or the loss. It's sales experience first by a long shot, product kind of, sort of, and then price is just an excuse, to Brad's point.
Anything? We've got a couple minutes left. Anything else or any other questions, I should say?
A few people in the chat were asking for the proven sales competencies. So I dropped those in the chat to everyone, take a look. But I think we've touched upon all the other ones in the Q&A. So I'll pass it off to Connor if you have any questions.
Oh, Connor, did you have a question? we can spend the last 5 minutes. Connor always has good questions.
I've jotted down a few. One quick one, Nick. You used the term deal universe a few times throughout today's conversation. Would you mind just defining that for everyone? And specifically, when does a closed opportunity, when is it no longer considered part of your deal universe, if there is a clear model?
Yeah, what we use it specifically in the context of win-loss analysis, just to say, what's the volume of deals your teams pursue? So if you've got an open opportunity, or if you look back over the past 12 months at your closed opportunities, those make up your, so to speak, deal universe. What's the potential number of data points you could achieve? And I would say stretch beyond just the person that your rep was meeting with, get to that buying committee, right? They're part of your deal universe as well. We all know that it's 7+ people, involved in that decision. So yes, you need to get your full deal universe coverage as much as possible. And then your follow-up question, which is, when does it no longer become part of? In the sake of win-loss, or in the context of win-loss, it's still, even if it's been closed, lost for 6 months, it's still part of your deal universe, because that was an opportunity for you to go get feedback or insights, with or from. We would recommend, if you're just starting win-loss analysis and you want to get just a quick boost of data and insights, go back, and this does vary based on, your sales process, but go back 30 to 120 days, include them in your deal universe for the program, and then just do it real time moving forward. Awesome. Anything beyond that 120, even if it was a very hands-on sales process, people can't remember why they made the decision.
Gotcha. And then one more, this one's more for Brad. Brad, you mentioned, you walked us through those 3 areas of where you can train your sellers, core skill development, prod training, and sales process and methodology. If the feedback you get from your win-loss analysis indicates that there's room for improvement in all 3 of those areas, do you have any advice for folks on which one to prioritize? How do you can't, I know you said that they're all related, but tactically it'd be hard to tackle all 3 at once. So any advice there on which of the 3 is you should focus on first when there's room for improvement in all of them?
Yeah, I think you'd have to probably determine like which you would have the most value in being able to affect. So for instance, like internally, skill development is generally challenging. Like I said, unless you have internal resources, probably sales process and methodology you could do based on available resources, reading some books and blogs and different things, and you could implement it. But again, you probably would use some outside help unless somebody internally has really strong foundations of that. Usually sales leaders do. And then the product is something that you probably have internal capabilities to address. And that's usually just like a cross-functional thing. It's getting product in the room with sales, getting product on sales calls, and actually hearing or listening to some of this win-loss analysis. Like that's a great way for them to understand where the gaps are. CS team usually has really good information. So I would say like if you're trying to do it on without bringing outside resources, I'd probably start there. But usually the core competencies are the ones that have the biggest change, because now we're starting from a foundation of like really understanding how to drive a sales process. And that probably lends itself to being able to get deals across the line that are maybe a toss-up.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's
awesome. All right, great. If you're still with us, thank you. We took you right up until the end. These are just a few win-loss Wednesdays that we have on our site. If you go to crayon.co, you can check out the resources section there, and those are recorded. I want to just thank Brad and Nick for an awesome session. We all learned so much, great advice, and just thank you. Thank you for participating.
Thanks for having us. It was great to be here.
The opportunity. Thanks, team.